Marathon 2025, Meshack M, 26.2. I was so exhausted at this point. It was soaking wet. Brutal, brutal.
Well, the cold, wet weather today didn't stop thousands of runners.
15,000 people stepped off Sunday.
I've never run a marathon before. I've actually never even run a half marathon before. I've been a hobby runner for most of the last decade. I started when I was like 16 years old, and I would just go to the gym and just like run on the treadmill, but I've never done like an actual official race. I've just like gone out and run. But for my entire life, I've thought about running a marathon. And so this year, at around the end of August, I was looking up about the marathons, and you kind of needed to sign up by the end of the month. And I looked into doing the half marathon, and then I thought about it, and I was like, well, why don't we just try to do the full marathon? Now, this was end of August. I just got back from my honeymoon. I knew I was about to go shoot a movie. I hadn't really been running all summer with the wedding and everything else going on. And so I had about 6 weeks to train to get ready and into marathon running shape. I kind of thought, I got this. I can run a marathon. We have a bike trail down the street from us. And so I started doing longer runs. I was just curious, how far do I think I can run? I want to say the longest run I did was like 7-8 miles before I signed up. And I signed up for the marathon on August 31st. August 31st, and then the race was here on the 19th. Like my last long run, I think was on the 6th, because I wanted to give myself basically 2 weeks of recovery time. So I only really had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 weeks-ish to train. And my longest run up to this point had been 8 miles. So at this point, the goal was really just to try to get in as many miles as possible before the actual race itself. So I tried doing like one really long run every week. And so that really long run started at like the 8 miles, and then every week I added like 2 extra miles to it. So I did 8 miles, 10 miles, and then I got up to 13.1. So I did a half marathon. So at around this point, I was feeling pretty good. Still about a month out from the marathon itself, I'd already done a half marathon, but I was also really feeling it afterwards. And so the next week I dropped back down, I did like 10 miles. And then the week after that, I said, I'm gonna do another half marathon. Ran that again, felt pretty good about that half. But at this point, I was so close to the race, I didn't want to risk putting on more miles and injuring myself prior to the actual race. So the week after that, I ran 10 miles, and then I tapered back from there down to the week before. I think I only ran like 5 or 6 miles. Okay, so from here, let's talk about the race day itself. Here are some things that I really wasn't expecting. First of all, I didn't realize how early I was gonna have to get up. Like, the race started at 7:30, which means we needed to be downtown by around 6:30, which means we needed to be leaving our house by around 6, which meant I needed to be up and have eaten breakfast by like 5:15 so that I could at least try to go to the bathroom before the race. TMI, but among marathon runners, there's kind of a stereotype about shitting yourself on the race, and that was something I really wanted to avoid. I was like, I don't want to do that. It was also going to be double the amount of time that I've actually ever run, because the longest run that I did was that 13.1 miles. So I'd done a half marathon in my training, but I'd never done anything longer than that. And on race day, I was literally going to go double. I was gonna do 26.2 miles. Let's make some tea. 2 days before the race, I was talking to my dad, and he said, have you seen the conditions of what it's supposed to be like on Sunday? And before, when I had looked, it was just supposed to be like 50 and cloudy, which is great, right? You don't want it to be too hot, and obviously you don't want it to rain. Then I checked 2 days before, and the temperature had changed a little bit. It was supposed to be about 68 degrees, and it was supposed to be thunderstorming. At first, I was a little bit nervous they were gonna cancel it, but that's just not the way they do things. They're gonna proceed in the rain. There were about 15,000 people who were signed up for this race. The entire of the downtown of Columbus was shut down. They weren't canceling this for some rain. And when we showed up on Sunday morning, the rain was already coming down. Now, it did mean that the race was a little bit delayed, which was not great to just be standing out in the corral in the rain. But eventually, they got everything going, and the race started. So we finally took off at around 8 a.m. and there were people lined up all up and down both sides of the street, giving high fives, cheering, like just being so incredibly supportive. And that basically continued for the entire race. Like there was hardly a spot along the entire 26 miles that there wasn't a group of people cheering us on. One of the things about marathon running is that everyone is in their own sport, right? Everyone is kind of running their own race. And so you're sort of not really competing with each other, you're just competing with yourself. And because of that, there was just this like great camaraderie in the sport. Like everyone was excited for each other, which I feel like in most sports that is not the case. And I think that's part of the reason why I like running so much, is that it's such an individualized thing. Like this isn't about me versus you, this is about me versus me. And that's just an incredible thing. Like I really like that in a sport. Energy was high. The rain actually made the temperature a lot cooler. So even though it was close to 70 degrees, it felt a lot colder than that. It was a huge group of people that I was with. And I started to kind of find my own pace. And honestly, for the first half of the race, I felt great. It was so much fun to be around all of these people, to be out there in the streets. I mean, I feel like I got to see my city in a way that I'd never seen it before, because I was able to run down like the main drag of the city. And we went from very different parts of the city, and so you could kind of see the evolution of it as we were running. I was about 2 hours into the race. I was hoping to run about a 4-hour marathon. That was kind of my goal. And I was on pace to do that at around halfway through. Now, after we passed the halfway point, there was sort of a spot where all the half marathon runners kind of split off. So suddenly the amount of runners seemed like it dropped by about 80%, and the race started getting a lot more intense. There were a couple reasons why it got so much more intense. None of it had to do with the other runners. Like everyone else around me was fantastic. But the rain, which had sort of been drizzling all day, decided it was finally time to pick up and actually start dumping water. I remember around mile 16, 17, the sky kind of cracked open and it just started flooding. Where before there'd been a little bit of rain, like we were kind of wet, we got soaked. Like absolutely everything, down to your underwear, down to your socks, sloshing in your shoes, just wet water. And number two, as soon as I passed the halfway mark, I was now running further than I had ever run before in my entire life, which I didn't think would be an issue, except that around mile 18, I started getting searing pain in both of my quads. They started to seize up, they started to cramp, they started to hurt like hell. And for the first time in the race, I had to just stop and try to stretch and breathe and even do some light walking. Now at 18 miles in, you still have 8.2 miles to go. Is that right? 18, yeah, you still have 8.2 miles to go, which is not nothing. Now for the next leg, I was kind of able to brace through the pain. I started telling myself that maybe the pain was a feature, not a bug, of running this far, but my legs were seizing. It was becoming harder and harder to take each next step. My calves were burning, my heels were screaming in pain. But even though it was pouring down rain and my body was cramping up on me, I knew that I needed to press on. I needed to prove to myself that I could actually run a marathon. And like, I don't know. On the one hand, it sounds like this very like bro-y kind of like, oh, I just need to prove how tough I am to be able to do this. But this was a goal that I had. This was something that I really wanted to achieve and something I wanted to prove to myself that I could actually do. And I also knew that physically I had it in me. I was pretty sure I wasn't gonna cause any permanent damage. And if I could just push through the next few miles, I could get all the way to the end. I know that every step I take is literally bringing me one step closer to finishing this race. And as I got closer, I was sort of expecting there to be this like final burst of adrenaline and it was gonna be like way easier and I was gonna just like have this energy to kind of sprint across the finish line. But honestly, the last 1.2 miles, after I passed that 25-mile marker all the way to the finish line, I was barely hanging on. I wasn't gonna quit. At no point did I feel like I needed to quit, but I was really, really pushing myself to get there. My quads were seizing, my calves were screaming, but I was determined to get across that finish line. So at 4 hours and 31 minutes and 55 seconds, I finally crossed that finish line. And I was pretty proud about that. Now look, I'm not telling this to like try to brag or anything like that. Like there were lots of people that completed much faster times than I did, but it was certainly the hardest thing physically that I have ever done. Especially those last 9 to 10 miles were just absolutely brutal. I had a friend text me the night before the race and he said, remember, really the race tomorrow is a 9.2 mile race. You just have 17 miles to warm up for it. And that felt very accurate. And so injury-wise, it was pretty tough to get up the stairs when I came home. And I've spent a lot of time with ice packs and heat packs on me for the past 48 hours. But my Achilles are starting to feel a little bit better. My quads still are a bit sore, but I think that we're getting there. Overall, it was a really incredible experience and just taught me a lot about what I'm capable of and like what I can do. There's such an immense internal reward from setting out a goal and saying, this is something that I want to do. It's not something I have to do. It's something I'm choosing to do that is going to be really, really hard. And then actually going out and achieving that thing. Yes, it certainly gives me a sense of pride and accomplishment, but it also is like a token of evidence in the bank that I can do hard things. Will I run a marathon again? I don't know. If I do, I'll certainly train a lot more. There was so much joy and camaraderie and positivity in the sport. Like, even though it was this crazy hard thing that everyone was doing, there was just so much support for one another. There was a spot around mile 23, you know, we're so close to the end and everyone's gas tank is just on E. And there was this guy and he was just leaning off to the side and he was kind of bent over and just like huffing and puffing. And this other guy ran up next to him. He said, bro, you could do it. You got this. Like, you can make it across. And the other guy was like, I don't know, man. I'm not sure. Like, and the other guy kind of grabbed his arm and he was like, I got you, man. Let's do this. And that was the energy of it. And like, maybe next year it doesn't downpour. Like, that would be kind of cool too.